All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Tuesday, May 21st. It is 9 a.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board colleagues. Joining me in person today is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, Board Member Sean McGuire, and shortly, Board Member Nicole Morgan. And joining us remotely is Board Member Laurel Firestone. As you can see, and with us as well is our two Chief Deputies, Jonathan Bishop and Karen Mogus, our Chief Counsel, Michael Loffer, our Clerk of the Board is Courtney Tyler, and assisting her today is Margie Argel. As you can see, this is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and virtual components. For those of you joining us virtually, if you intend on commenting on any items today, you should be on the Zoom platform. Otherwise, you're viewing us through our customary live webcast on the Cal EPA website, or the YouTube live link. If you have any challenges getting onto the Zoom platform today and like to comment on any of the items, please do look at the top of the agenda. There's a link. But if you are having issues, please do email the clerk of the board at board.clerk@waterboards.ca.gov, and she can help get you onto the platform. Once you are on the platform, your camera will be off. You will be on mute until it's your turn to speak on the item you've indicated. For everyone in the room here, good morning. Good to see you all. We're in Sacramento in the California Environmental Protection Agency building. A few announcements for us as well. If we happen to have an emergency, please observe the exits here. We'll calmly file out to Cesar Chavez Plaza and await any further direction. Also, if you intend on commenting on any item today in today's agenda, there is a laptop and a QR code here at the side of the room in order to sign up. Once you're at the mic, please do introduce yourself, any affiliation you have. And lastly, please do silence any phones so that we have an uninterrupted discussion today. With that, I would think we can start to get into our first item of business, which is public forum. And still myself needing to bring up my public forum list, look to the clerk of the board for who our first commenter may be. Okay, I believe we have Mr. Ray to hear.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. Good morning.
Yeah, now I understand what a carrot is. Okay, here we go. Next slide, please. I sent Chair Esquivel and Vice Mayor Diamo a letter detailing the issues raised at the May 7th State Board meeting. Rather than repeating those issues here, which are highly sensitive, I recommend a meeting with state board members and staff, along with RB4 Chair Norma Camacho and Vice Chair David Nahai. 1 second, please. Which will hopefully resolve some of the issues that have been presented to you and to them. Next slide, please. The City of Norwalk, which I represent, will be requesting a meeting with the State Board to discuss issues raised in Norwalk's litigation against RB4 regarding the 2021 MS4 permit. Although litigation was dismissed, the Superior Court judge in the matter of James Chalfine issued a stipulation on September 27, 2022, which states, whereas the attorneys of the record for the parties have further met and conferred, and the Regional Board has acknowledged and agreed that will continue to work with petitioner in good faith to address the matters raised by petitioner in the petition that are subject of its challenges to the 2021 MS4 permit by and through any available administrative process. Unfortunately, RB4 has not owned up to what it agreed to. It took several attempts to meet with RB4 staff to begin negotiations in good faith. A letter dated June 5th, 2023 was sent to Norwalk City Manager, to the board's chair, and there's been no response. And also there are other attempts at getting the regional board to respond, which have not been successful. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The board finally responded by setting a meeting date of November 1st, 2023. At that meeting, issues were raised. But we should point out that according to the Citizens Guide to Working with the California Water Boards, the public may meet with the board. Again, that has not happened. And Norwalk's quite concerned because if no meeting takes place, then Norwalk is going to be forced to notify the court and ask for a court order compelling the regional board to meet. Next slide, please. Given that RB4 is obviously not interested in negotiating with Norwalk, Norwalk asked the state board to assume responsibility or direct RB4 to engage in serious, timely negotiations with Norwalk. Now, Norwalk is considering informing the board of RB4's foot dragging and requesting the court to issue a court order. There's no guarantee that RB4 will respond. It could very well be that RB4 staff and legal counsel do not possess the technical and legal knowledge to understand or respond to Norwalk's issues. Perhaps the state board can lend its own staff who are qualified to handle this task. Next, RB4 should be reminded once again that according to the Citizens Guide to Working with California Water Boards, the public can participate in board decision-making by, among other things, scheduling appointments to visit board staff. Next slide. Okay, and so that's the end of my presentation. Once again, I look forward to meeting with state board staff on this matter as soon as possible. And please, please let us know where we can meet. I mean, if we can meet in Sacramento or we can meet, in LA, whatever. We'll be willing to meet anyway. Thank you very much. If you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to respond to them.
Thank you, Mr. Tahir. Appreciate your time this morning in public forum. I don't think we have any specific response at this point, but looking to Mr. Lawfer in case there's any points he'd like to make.
Happy to. Chief Counsel Michael Lawfer. I will follow up with counsel for the LA board. It has been a long time since I saw that particular stipulation, and essentially it was just a dismissal of the claims in the lawsuit, and there were no specific ordering provisions, but that does not relieve the region of its responsibility if it's agreed to meet and confer with the city of Norwalk. Obviously, many of these issues have been the subject of extensive discussions before the regional board in public settings. That specific stipulation dismissal of the lawsuit concerned the prior MS4 permit, but we'll figure out where they are. I know that the Division of Water Quality has been looking at some of the issues, and there's, I think, a forthcoming letter with respect to some of the issues that Mr. Tahir raised at the last public forum earlier this month. And so we'll see if we can kind of bootstrap some of that in together.
Appreciate that, Mr. Lawfer. Ms. Mogus, anything further you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to indicate that not only are we responding to his comments from the public forum at the last board meeting, but also he wrote a letter outlining all of those concerns more clearly. And so we'll be responding and happy to meet with him on our response to his letter and appreciate OCC's support on the issues he raised today.
Thank you both for that responsiveness. And thank you, Mr. Tahir, for here addressing the board in public forum. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. All right. I think that wraps. Oh, we have one more public forum commenter. Okay. It sounds like the individual just submitted the request, so we'll give them a moment to join the platform. I know we have time this morning. We don't have a very long agenda, but what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and move us, and I'll come back to the public forum commenter once they join the platform. Oh, it looks like, okay. They will be joining. Good morning. Good morning. You're currently in public forum. Is this Estela Villagrana?
Yes, hello. This is Todd Hickman. I'm just using her iPad device today. I would like to speak. I would like to speak on consolidation. I've spoke before. I come to you this morning with a voice of past experience. I've been an elected water board official for 8 years, and I'm a retired government regulator specializing in several programs, including the underground storage tank program, among others. So this morning, I would like to come to you to again urge you to do everything you can to consolidate the North Yuba Water District with the South Feather Water and Power Water District. There was a 2005 agreement that was supposed to end all disputes, and this 2005 agreement has created many more disputes. They've been involved in an active lawsuit for roughly 70 years. The most recent lawsuit's been going on for 5 years. The North Yuba Water District, the smaller of the two, has spent over $5 million on this lawsuit in a mere 5 years. And this is a little agency with only 8 employees. Half of those are clerical, very few customers, less than 1,000 customers, and very little beneficial use. They have been extorting the larger agency, South Feather, for these 5 years. I just did a public records request, and South Feather Water and Power District has submitted almost 100,000 pages of documents. 100,000 pages of documents for this lawsuit. Staff is spending all their time on this lawsuit instead of focusing on beneficial use. I would like to see these agencies consolidated into the larger district, South Feather Water and Power, which has all the water rights in the world, however, is running short on money due to these lawsuits and the giveaways to the smaller district. And again, this 2005 agreement has created nothing but problems. I personally have witnessed several scandalous acts on the side of the North Yuba Water District. We now have 3 different legal basically teams, businesses, 3 different legal businesses representing this little teeny agency with a mere 8 employees. And I have seen staff counsel representing individual board members on private matters. This stuff violates the Hippocratic Oath, as well as violates all good judgment in relation to public agencies. So this situation just continues to escalate. Fundage continues to be spent on non-beneficial use. And it really is affecting me as a business owner in this district. I grow grapes, distill, wine make, and we need more water. All of us need more water. And right now, expansion of water is completely shut down due to all the time and money being spent on litigation between these 2 agencies, which once again, the 2005 agreement was supposed to stop once and for all. However, it has only escalated the legal action between these 2 agencies. And again, it seems almost impossible that a little teeny agency such as North Yuba could have 3 different legal teams representing them, spending over $5 million in the last 5 years. I think they're on path this year to come close to $2 million in legal fees. And their sole goal is just to get more money out of South Feather, the larger agency. South Feather has 60 employees and has come up against a wall with money due to declining power rates, what they get paid through the PG&E contracts and transmission costs and everything else, and as well as the increased cost of regulation. So it is really affecting the customers, the voter owners in South Feathers District. So again, I urge the board to do everything you can to consolidate these 2 districts. It's one watershed. The names are very deceiving, or at least the name of the North Yuba. It has nothing to do with the North Yuba River. It's all South Feather watershed. So we're talking about 2 agencies operating in one watershed. It should be one watershed, one water agency. I believe the board is aware of this. Again, I've spoke before, and I know you have, quite extensive knowledge of this. So again, this is a crisis for the voter owners, the customers of South Feather. We're not receiving any expansion or any additional water because all of staff time is being taken up with the lawsuit and paying for the lawsuit, which has basically crippled South Feather as far as funding goes. So I appreciate your time this morning. I appreciate everything the board is doing. And again, I urge you, I even beg you, I beg you to do something about this situation. It is a disaster for us as the voter owners, the customers of both of these districts, actually. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Mr. Hickman. I appreciate your time this morning. Just a point of clarification, as in looking to our folks, as I understand, we obviously have consolidation authorities around drinking water systems, not irrigation systems. And so it's not actually something within the board's power to be able to force a consolidation on.
Well, these are water supply, private water, drinking water suppliers as well.
Okay. Appreciate that, Mr. Hickman.
Yeah, and just following up, Chair, there are limited circumstances where the board can order consolidations in the drinking water space for public water systems. I know our staff had looked closely at some of these issues after hearing from Mr. Hickman and others over the course of the winter. I know our Division of Water Rights staff have had multiple meetings with some of the representatives of each of the entities involved. But when we looked closely at the availability to utilize our consolidation authority, we did not see a clear nexus. It doesn't quite fall within the range of authorities that have been given. But we can certainly roll up our sleeves. There are some slightly new allegations coming out today and see if we can find a bucket for it.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Lawfer. And thank you again for your time this morning, Mr. Hickman.
Thank you.
And I believe that wraps up our public forum commenters, and appreciate everyone that's come and spoken before the board this morning. That brings us now to official board business. And the first item of business is our consideration of the May 7th board meeting minutes. Looking to fellow board colleagues if there are any adjustments and or a motion.
I'll make a motion.
A second.
Thank you both. Ms. Tyler, can you please call a roll call vote?
Excuse me, Board Member Morgan. Aye. Board Member McGuire.
Aye.
Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
And Chair Esquivel.
Aye. Thank you.
Abstain.
Abstain. Apologies. I'm in auto mode. I was not here at the last board meeting because, well, yes, I wasn't. So thank you. Abstain. Thank you, clerk. And the board meeting minutes are adopted, and appreciate everyone's vote on it. Next, we'll go to our informational item, which is our current hydrologic conditions and response, and would welcome up Jessica Bean and James Knockbauer to lead us on the item.
Good morning, board members. We
Morning, good
actually have
morning.
a bunch of folks joining today, some in person and some on our Zoom platform. So thank you. I'm Jessica Bean. I'm with the Division of Water Rights. And if we can go to the next slide, please. We have a variety of things to touch base on, so I'm going to try to quickly move through the water supply conditions portion, Scott and Shasta River watershed update. We also have our water rights annual reports update, and then we're going to talk to you about groundwater. Today we have our colleagues from the Department of Water Resources will be joining us on the platform. And then our folks will talk a bit about groundwater recharge permitting, and we'll wrap things up with our monthly urban water conservation and production update. All right, next slide, please. So if we take a look at our traditional slides here of precipitation, this is our northern Sierra precipitation, and we across have stayed about pretty consistent. We're at 94% of average in this area today. Next slide, please. And for the San Joaquin area, we are at 86%. I'm realizing how small these numbers are when I'm trying to read them from back here. Maybe need to update that in the future. 86% of average in the San Joaquin area. And then if we go to the next slide, in the Tulare Basin, we are at 84%. Again, this is very similar to where we were the last time we met.
Next slide, please. In terms of our, our snowpack, our snow water content, this has gone down about 21% since the last meeting. So we're looking at about 78% of average statewide for this time of year. We had a bit of a warm spell. So far, what we're hearing is this isn't tremendously concerning at this point because we have had, above water year and then a relatively average one this time. So we're looking okay on that. But you can see that the Northern Sierra is still at about 98%, go into the Central 78% of average. And then when you get to the Southern area, we're at 56% of average. Next slide, please. The major reservoirs are, again, about the same as where we've seen them, at or above average for most of them. That includes the select south of Delta reservoirs here. Again, everything is pretty consistent with what you've heard a couple weeks ago. Next slide, please. Just want to mention that we are in a moderate time right now for our temperature, but the National Weather Service is predicting that we may see some above average temperatures in the upcoming 3 months. So most of the models are consistently saying that parts of the country are going to see pretty high heat waves. And if you take a look at the key at the bottom of this graph, you'll see kind of the orange to red is saying where we're going to see above average, and the darker colors are likely above average. And then the kind of lighter oranges are leaning above, and that's where we're sitting right now. There are some interesting discussions happening, though, after August that we may see a pretty warm late summer and autumn. So we'll be keeping an eye on that moving forward. Next slide, please. In terms of the Scott and Shasta rivers, we have no curtailments in effect right now, but we are continuing to monitor conditions, particularly in the Shasta watershed, to determine when we are going to need curtailments. As you can see here, Dwinell Reservoir is still pretty full. And then our snow course survey, again, this is the same that we saw last time, so there's not a huge change happening here, but Scott snow water equivalent is at 99% of May average. Shasta is at 160% of April average. Next slide, please. Again, you're familiar with these as well. You can see the precipitation in green. The blue line would be the flows for the Scott River, where we measure them at the Fort Jones gauge, and then our red line shows the curtailment level. Right now, we're staying above that. Next slide, please. And the same for the Shasta River. You can see the blue line. The flows are still above the emergency level for the curtailments. Next slide, please. And then here, we spoke last time pretty extensively with Aaron Ragazzi was here to talk about the emergency regulation and its implementation. Did just want to note that we have the overview of groundwater local cooperative solutions from last meeting, and that information is starting to go up on our webpage. And then we're looking at almost 14,000 acres, which is more than 75% of groundwater irrigated in the Scott River watershed is included in those local cooperative solutions. And then we did have a petition for reconsideration related to the Shasta River watershed setting permanent flows. The board did deny that on May 15th, noting that there was direction related to the longer term efforts happening in both watersheds, but it did also include a commitment for a board meeting item on this topic later this year. So more on that to come soon. Folks can check out our Scott and Shasta River drought page for more information. Next slide, please. And then to kind of wrap my section up, just wanted to, again, give you an update on where we are with the water rights annual reporting. Since the last time we've met, we have ticked down from 31 to 30% of folks have not reporting. Yeah, it's still a little disconcerting. So if you go to the next slide, please. Again, these numbers are looking pretty similar to what you've seen before. I want to draw your attention to the lowest bar there, where we still have about 14 of our largest water diverters who have not submitted their reports. It was 16. So we've had 2 more folks come into compliance since the last time we've met. But again, we are still actively working towards getting these numbers to continue to go down lower so we can have our water rights reporting as accurate and timely as possible.
Of those 14 of these largest diverters that have not reported, is there a geographic kind of spread? Which watersheds mainly are they pulling out of? Do we know? Just kind of more out of curiosity at this point.
Yeah, I think we have some of that information. I don't know it offhand, but I can say that we've reached out to all of these folks individually, and we are working with them. And actually, our hope is that within the next week or two, they will be submitting their reports. So we've definitely targeted those areas, but I think we'll have more information on that the next time we meet with you.
Vice Chair, please.
And if you could, just because I know we've seen some information internally here about your efforts, but if you could talk a little bit about transparency, how could the public, if the public wanted to find out who are these agencies, where are they located, more information, what's the process for daylighting?
That is a very good question. We're going to be posting information on the notices of violation online, and I know we have some other ones. I'm actually going to turn to you to come up here.
Thanks. I'll jump in real quickly. We actually do have this information posted online. It's a Power BI tool, and our SB 88 team has posted it, so we can supply that link, and you can look at all 40-ish thousand water rights and see who's reported and who hasn't. But I will say that the 14 and much of the 23 in the above row are the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and we are working with them. There are some accounting issues that they're trying to work through. It may take them until the end of June to get this information in, but it is a noted data gap, and it has been there for some time.
Well, this is an area I think we all want to explore a little bit more. So maybe whether it's the next update or I'm not quite sure, but if this is something that goes on every year, hopefully these accounting issues will be resolved so that in the future they can meet the deadline. But looking also to get the information maybe more broadly publicized and I don't know. For me, I think I'd like to have a briefing on it, just to walk through the link and see, get a better sense of how easy it is to digest, so that you don't get crowded out by that 9,000 plus that may not be as informative.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Board Member Diadamo, and that is something that we're actively working on in the division, asking that very same question. How can we take the 40,000 water rights that we have and kind of parse it out in digestible graphics and information that can be usable by both us and the public? We do have a team working on it. They've made great progress on it. We're not quite there yet, but we're hoping in the very near future we'll be able to do something a little bit more formal, and we'll brief all the board members on it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep, really appreciate that information. And I can sympathize with the Bureau of Reclamation. I know they have a very complex system that they're running, and but the timely gathering of this information is really important. So really do want to work with them to figure out how we fix that. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for answering those questions.
Okay, and I think that's where I'm going to wrap things up and invite our colleagues from Department of Water Resources to join us. So if we can go to the next slide, we can start. They're going to do a little update for you on the groundwater conditions report.
Great. Right. And thank you, Mr. Gosselin and Springhorn for joining us here. Thank you very much.
Chair Esquivel, board members, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm Paul Goslin, Deputy Director for Sustainable Water Management at the Department of Water Resources. I'm going to turn over to Stephen Springhorn to go over the semi-annual groundwater conditions report. I do want to make 2 points. One is this is a very interesting report based upon the 2023 water year, which was very unique in many circumstances. But also the data, and Stephen will get into this, represents a compilation from annual reports from the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So it's another good benchmark on the importance and strength of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act by getting these locally derived reports and data. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you, Deputy Director Goslin and Chair and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My voice is a little going out today, so if you can't hear me, just let me know and I'll speak more clearly. Next slide, please. So as Deputy Director Goslin mentioned, this is a recent report that we published beginning of this month, May 6th. And it's our semi-annual groundwater conditions report. And it really fits in the middle of the spectrum of different types of information that we're trying to get out on California's critically important groundwater resources. And we are seeing, as Deputy Director Goslin mentioned, a huge increase in the action in groundwater under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, as well as that's translating into more and more information that's being reported. And so we're trying to find ways to get that information out there and accessible in different formats for different audiences. And so this report that we'll talk more about today is in the middle. And then starting on the left side of this screen is our more traditional California's Groundwater Bulletin 118. And that bigger, more detailed report is updated every 5 years and is currently being worked on as we speak. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have developed what's called California's Groundwater Live. That's updated daily and provides up-to-the-day information on California's groundwater levels, land subsidence, well infrastructure, and other information. And all of this is available on that link on the bottom and our open data page. So we're really trying to increase the information and access as it comes into us. So next slide, please. So a little bit more details on this semi-annual conditions report. So what this report really highlights is looking back at water year 2023, as Deputy Director Goslin mentioned, and really an important milestone that for the first time, this report gives the full synthesis of 99 basins that have reported their groundwater sustainability plan and alternative plan annual reports. Those 99 basins or reports really reflect about 90% of all groundwater used in all 515 groundwater basins. So really it's reflecting the vast majority of groundwater used across the state. And if you combine about roughly 30 adjudicated areas in Southern California, that number goes up to about 98%. So through SGMA implementation, we now have about 98% of all groundwater use captured in annual reports that come into the state every April 1st for the preceding water year. So this spring 2024 report really focuses on the tremendous amount of effort and action that happened on managed recharge in water year 2023 in the very wet water year, and how those actions really changed the conditions across the state in groundwater. It also includes the latest information on groundwater extraction, groundwater storage, groundwater levels, subsidence, well infrastructure, and groundwater monitoring efforts. And then since this is reported, this report comes out every 6 months, the next one will be coming in the fall timeframe. Next slide, please. So starting with the bottom line up front, really what we saw with the latest information that was reported across the state is that we had a really great water year. Water year 2023, really, there's a lot of water, it's very wet. It replenished a lot of the surface water reservoirs, as Ms. Bean showed in the graph earlier. However, and it was really good for groundwater conditions as well, as we'll look at in a second. However, if we look at that in the context of the last couple of decades, we see that we have had these spikes or these rebound or recovery years in the wet years, such as 2019, 2017, and previous. However, we're in a longer term decline in groundwater deficit in California, looking at the Central Valley. So again, a great year in 2023, but we have to be mindful that we're in a downward trend in groundwater change in storage, in this case, in this graph, the Central Valley. So this chart, just looking at it, it's the blue line is the cumulative departure from mean or average precip. So the lack of precip over the years. And then the red line is the estimated change in groundwater storage in the Central Valley, working with our colleagues at NASA JPL with some of their new satellite technology. And so you can see the red dashed line and the blue lines match pretty well when you don't have precip and surface water, that's when California's groundwater basins, which are our drought buffer, come into play. They're utilized tremendously, and you have a big decrease in groundwater storage, as we see here in this chart. So again, water year 2023 was a good bounce up, but overall we're continuing to be in a deficit, groundwater deficit, and that's why continued implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is so important. Next slide, please. So a couple other highlights to point out. So again, positive groundwater trends we saw in 2023, but we still are in this long-term deficit. So next click, please. So looking at groundwater pumping, water year 2023, there was about 9.7 million acre feet reported from those 99 basins. That's a little bit more than half of the amount of pumping that occurred in the previous water year, which was a drought year. And so you had a significant decrease in groundwater pumping we saw reported from the previous dry years, which is something that is expected, but pretty interesting. Next click, please. And then combining that with less pumping and then managed recharge, and this is really a big number. This is the highest number of managed recharge that has been reported in the Sigma era. It's a short sample size. However, it's the highest that has ever been reported. So you can see how it compares to the previous dry years. As you would expect, it's much higher of managed recharge reported last year or wet year than the previous dry years. And then comparing it to water year 2019, which we didn't have as many annual reports submitted back then, but most of the San Joaquin Valley was submitted there. It's about double this past water year 23 compared to the last wet water year 2019. And then next click, please. So you had about half the pumping, a substantially more amount of managed recharge, and then it's no surprise that the change in groundwater storage was dramatic increase. So we had an increase of 8.7 million acre feet of change in storage across those 99 basins that reported. And you compare that to the previous dry years, which had a large amount of decrease in change in storage, and you can see that change there. But as mentioned previously, the previous years of groundwater storage change have been mostly negative. And then next click, please. So then all of that really reflects what we saw and reporting in this report is a broad scale increase in groundwater levels across the state, less subsidence, and fewer dry wells reported. So just that gives you a high level picture of overall what this report shows. Next click, please.
I'm Mr. Springhorn. Thank you for this presentation, and sorry to interrupt your presentation here. I'm awestruck, frankly, by the amount of managed recharge that we all saw here in the last water year. I think it's remarkable. But I just want to make sure that I'm tracking with the definition. And I think I know what managed recharge is, but I just want to make sure, and maybe you can steer me in the right direction if I'm misunderstanding. But I would interpret that to mean actions like diversions to spreading basins, maybe some of the flood management actions, on-farm recharge, maybe aquifer storage and recovery wells, those kinds of actions. Does that capture the range of what the definition of managed recharge is? Or is there something else to that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, it is a broad umbrella of managed recharge actions. And so those that you described are included. And for more information on what actions were included, each one of these 99 annual reports that were submitted by groundwater sustainability agencies has more details. And so there's a lot of variability from one basin to the other and what managed recharge actions occurred. But there is that additional detail there. But it really encompasses a broad range of managed recharge actions.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. And an important point you're raising here is that it does not include the natural recharge. So natural recharge is a much bigger number that it's much harder to quantify across every square inch of California. But that is something that we're we're working on to try and just get some ballpark estimates of that. But so it does not include natural recharge.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with that. So thanks for the distinction.
Yep, thank you. Okay. All right, so now looking at into some of the specifics for each one of these categories of reporting. So groundwater extraction, here's a couple of the figures that show up in the report, and this is the information that we are now getting every April 1st and will be for the foreseeable future from the groundwater sustainability agencies. So top line message on extraction, again, statewide total reported 9.7 million acre feet. Of that total, about 80% was pumped within the Central Valley, 7.7 million acre feet. And of that, about 54% of the statewide total was pumped within the San Joaquin Valley, so totaling 5.4 million acre feet. So the chart on the left shows the dots are the amount of extraction in acre feet. So the bigger the dot, the more water extracted. And then the shading of the basin is the intensity of pumping, you could say. So it's acre feet per acre. And so these totals are reported by the groundwater sustainability agencies. They're aggregated extraction for the entire subbasin. So the GSAs are bringing information together and reporting it up to us, and we're publishing it in figures like this. And then another interesting way to look at this extraction data and the really extreme shift, as we're seeing more extreme shifts in weather patterns as climate change, as we have been seeing in California, is looking at the groundwater extraction of water year 2023 compared to, which was very wet, compared to the extreme dry of water year 2022. So the darker blue, the color, is representing a significant reduction in the amount of groundwater extracted. So that just goes to show that in the water year 2023, it was very wet in the southern San Joaquin Valley. This is also an area that has decades of groundwater recharge infrastructure and experience. And so those matched up well with also a lot of surface water in the system. So surface water was used extensively, a lot less groundwater was pumped, and a lot of managed recharge occurred in this area. So you saw a lot less pumping going on. And then the chart on the right shows the groundwater use as a percentage of total use. And so again, this shows that these groundwater sustainability agencies are dynamically shifting from water source to water source based on availability and other factors on the ground. And so any given year, about 40% of the entire state's water supply comes from groundwater. And then in drought years, it's up to 60%. But you can see that that's across the entire state average, but you can see there's a lot more detailed and variability across the state from basin to basin. So you can see even in a very wet year, some basins still rely heavily on groundwater just because of that's what their infrastructure is set at or into their local factors. So next slide, please. So looking at groundwater, so top line message, again, as already mentioned, we saw some big improvements in groundwater levels in the short term. So looking at a 1-year change from the fall of 2022, which was very dry and is still in drought conditions before all the atmospheric rivers started to come in. And then comparing that to the fall of 2023, after all that wet water year 2023 came through. And so you can see the green dots mean increase in groundwater levels of greater than 25 feet. And you can see the bar charts there represent the hydrologic regions. And so again, the Tulare Lake had the most increases in groundwater levels because a lot of surface water was in the system and utilized as opposed to, and not a lot of pumping occurred. So you saw a rebound in groundwater levels. So all in all, that was a good sign. But then you start to look at some of the longer term trends, again, matching what we saw earlier on in the changing groundwater storage. So looking at a 5-year change map, you start to see that even after a very wet year, some water levels are still lower than they were 5 years ago. And then looking at a 20-year trend, many areas groundwater levels are on a declining trend over 20 years. So next slide, please. So looking at subsidence, we had significant reduction in groundwater pumping, improvements in groundwater levels. So as expected, we saw a significant decrease in land subsidence. And so the map here on the left shows the footprint of anything in green color is land subsidence that's measured over 1/10 of a foot. And then anything in blue is actually where there was the land surface rebounded over 1/10 of a foot, actually uplift came up. And so that really reflects that less pumping, increased groundwater levels and pressure of the deep aquifer system actually allowed the aquifer system to recover and rebound and actually uplift by over 1/10 of a foot in an area of over 800 square miles. And more details are in the report, but it was really a dramatic change than previous years. And we can see that time history on the chart on the right, where we go back to water year 2016, which was at the tail end of a very intense drought. So lots of subsidence, very wet year. So longer term dry conditions punctuated with wet years in 2017, 19, and 2023, where you see these recovery years, less subsidence, and lower and more uplift and rebound in blue. But we see that the pattern is repeating itself with subsidence comes back when we have less water in the system. And so again, this is another area that's active in the SGMA space with subsidence management and long-term SGMA implementation. All right, next slide, please. So another thing that's tracked in this report is dry wells. This is work we really have been working at the technical level between the state board and DWR staff, working with NGOs and others. And the top line message here is that dry wells, there were fewer dry wells reported in water year 2023 and the beginning of water year 2024 than previous drought years. We do see that even in a very wet year, there were still elevated levels of dry wells reported. And some of this is likely a result of increased outreach and engagement through efforts at the board, state board, team, Department of Water Resources, state agency, family in general, working with NGOs to get the word out. There's ways to track dry wells. There's assistance available for dry wells. And so I think that really reflects overall better education and awareness of what to do when dry wells occur. And so I think that's what we're seeing, some of those elevated numbers that coming in, but overall less than in drought years. And the map just shows where those dry wells were reported across the state and in which counties. Next slide, please. Okay, so just finishing off with some the latest on the managed recharge, and then we'll hand it over to our colleagues at the state board to go into a little bit more details on the state supported recharge actions. But it was a banner year for managed recharge, as already mentioned. The most recharge reported in the SGMA era reflects extremely wet conditions in a part of the state that has a long history of managed recharge in the southern San Joaquin Valley, and a significant amount of local and state actions to really maximize the recharge and capture the available water when it was in the system. And so again, statewide number is 4.1 million acre feet, twice as much as the last wet year. Central Valley was about 3.9 million acre feet of that, or 94%. And then the San Joaquin Valley alone represented 3.8 million acre feet, or 93% of all the statewide total. So that is exceeding the Governor Newsom's water supply strategy goal to expand annual recharge by 500,000 acre feet. But we see from the numbers that number swings dramatically from the extreme dries to the extreme wets. So we got to, and we are, continue to keep our eye on the prize with and doing the year in and year out work to continue to enhance the state's recharge opportunities. So next slide, please. Just a couple examples of enhancing managed recharge. Since 2018, DWR has awarded over $120 million to about 70 groundwater recharge projects. It's estimated that this funding has increased recharge capacity by about 115,000 acre feet per year, and really trying to make the case that utilizing California's groundwater basins as our natural infrastructure as they are, really they provide order of magnitude more storage potential and opportunity than all surface water reservoirs combined. And so there's a lot of effort to better understand our natural infrastructure or groundwater basins to then sustainably use those basins to put water into those basins as best we can in the wet years to then be ready and prepared for the dry years that we know are coming. And so this just shows, and there's more information in the report about different ways that we're doing that. And then the last slide, please, is then how the state really supported recharge actions. And so there's a number of things mentioned in the report. We had some good collaboration with the state board team, technical team, to provide the latest numbers in this report, and we plan to continue to do that. And so looking at, and that were significant actions, and we know that more opportunities exist out there and that we're trying to work through. But this highlights the flood recharge executive orders that came down in water year 2023 to the tune of over 400,000 acre feet. And then the other state board driven permit actions there, and then some smaller DWR temporary flood diversion recharge enhancement actions as well. So those are told up and described. Again, a lot of work was done and more opportunity exists, and that is, and more information will be provided by the board next on some of these numbers. But thank you for the time today, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you as well. Really appreciate the summary and presentation on that information. Looking to fellow board colleagues if they have any immediate questions. Seeing none, we can continue on. Thank you, Mr. Springhorn.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, board members.
Morning.
I think we can go. There we are. Thank you. My name is Mike Conway, and I lead the Recharge and Major Projects Permitting Unit within the Division of Water Rights. Today, I will provide a review of recent recharge efforts made through temporary permits. Groundwater recharge is the primary mechanism cited by GSAs to address overdraft. We've observed that the interest in temporary permits for recharge is highest in wet years. We also know that surface water supplies are most physically and legally available in wet years, in the winter months, and during high flow events. And now we have experience using the streamlined pathway for expedited processing. So let's discuss the outcome of the 2022-2023 wet season. Next slide, please. This slide shows the temporary permit numbers DWR presented in the recent report. We issued 10 temporary permits authorizing a total of about 670,000 acre feet. These numbers are specifically about temporary permits and thus don't include the temporary change to the Bureau of Reclamation's right of about 600,000 acre feet. A recently concluded staff effort looked at how much water the parties could have diverted if considering the permit diversion triggers and if the permits were in place at the start of the project's diversion season. That potential amount of water available was about 80,000 acre feet. This can be compared to the 20,000 acre feet reported as actually diverted. When looking at these results, you may wonder why the amount of potential water diverted was so much lower than the authorized amount. The amount authorized is trying to allow for as much potential diversion as possible, since we don't know exactly what the future may hold. This means, though, that this number may be fairly high compared to what we actually see in the record. The max cap could be generated, for instance, based on the wettest year in the historic record, or something such as a hypothetical maximum based on the diversion rate multiplied by the total number of days in the season. In this water year, even though it was a very wet year, it was focused on two really large storm events, and these high flows weren't uniform across all watersheds in the state. Another question would be, why did parties only divert 20,000 acre feet? Let's get into that on the next slide. Next slide, please. Most of the applications received for water year 2023 were received later than advised. Late submittal resulted in late issuance and lost opportunities for diversion. Most of the permits issued in water year 2023 were issued mid-diversion season. For practical reasons, the volumes authorized match requested volumes rather than getting adjusted downwards, even though a permit issued mid-season cannot capture its full authorized volume. Based on the information provided by the permittees, we learned about the challenges associated with infrastructure and equipment. Most notably, fish screens and temporary pumps were not always available. We also learned that permittees struggled to obtain other permits associated with their projects. We also learned that permittees had difficulty complying with permit terms, particularly restrictive bypass conditions or expensive fish screens. Next slide, please. Water year 2023 was preceded by two critically dry water years. Reservoirs were low. Many did not anticipate the opportunity to capture high flow events. Despite the dry conditions, reservoirs filled and high flow events followed. It's worth noting that a similar pattern was observed in the wet water year 2017, which was also preceded by the dry period spanning from 2012 to 2016. The sudden onset of wet weather resulted in a rush of temporary permit requests for the 22-23 season. 9 of the 10 applications received were later than advised. A significant number of objections required resolution and added additional processing time. Still, 3 of the 10 permits were issued prior to the requested diversion season. But with so many permits issued mid-season, there was limited time for permittees to do any post-permit planning. We've identified a couple outreach efforts to help address the problems associated with late submittals, which I will share on the next slide. We also received feedback about the complexity of permit conditions and difficulty associated with compliance. For example, permits issued require compliance with other laws and require post-issuance efforts like obtaining lake and streambed alteration agreements, or obtaining a fish screen, or diversion monitoring and equipment. Another example of a complication is that diversion triggers are sometimes established through the resolution of objections or due to the need to make our permit findings regarding injury. To remedy these issues, again, we've identified outreach efforts and are also recommitted to offering post-issuance check-ins with permittees. Next slide, please. We have 2 planned outreach efforts for the coming 2024-2025 diversion season. We've prepared a communication to send to previous permittees and other likely applicants. We will highlight increased opportunity associated with early filing. We will also provide customized target filing dates and offer pre-consultation. We've also planned a staff workshop for the next month on June 26. It went up on our website today. This virtual event is intended for potential applicants and those interested in temporary permits for groundwater recharge. We plan to share how and where to file for a temporary permit and to provide tips for successful submittal. We also expect to share common permit terms and potential challenges, a discussion of diversion trigger selection, and an overview of the streamlined pathway. CDFW will be in attendance and is planning to discuss the consultation requirements for applicants. Any public inquiries should be directed to me, Mike Conway, at mike.conway@waterboards.ca.gov. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate, I know the efforts that have gone on here. The amount of learning these last 2 years has been tremendous, and being able to just get the attention, I think, of a lot of water right holders and users who are interested in doing recharge. And, to the points made about sometimes not getting as timely of an application or permit, bringing that further up into the year so that people have the full benefit of the diversion season with these permits. But importantly, we have the time to be able to work through what are often sometimes either issues or complications within the permit, to be able to do so with enough time. So as again, to get everyone ready for the diversion season. So I appreciate just the tremendous amount of work along with the Department of Water Resources that have gone on to really better understand, especially where these pinch points are in implementation of the permits. And so I think I really appreciate the presentation, folks coming and circling around this, because we don't know what this coming water year will bring. I think the lesson has been we don't know until things arrive, and it's better to pre-plan and have those in place in order to help. I guess just a quick question. I'm wondering how many applicants are moving toward the 5-year permit, since that does provide less of kind of a 1-year water year shot and more of an opportunity to have a permit that carries over through what hopefully are multiple opportunities for diversion, but not having to repeat that process, in a yearly form. Just kind of wondering what sort of trends I think we're seeing from the permit applicants as to, what makes sense financially to go through a process before the board on.
Amanda Montgomery, permitting program manager. So this last season, we did not see any 5-year temporary permittees. But for this next coming season, we do have a couple of our 180-day applicants who are moving that direction. Scott Valley, notably, is putting a lot of effort into that. We do encourage parties to switch to the 5-year for the reasons you mentioned. It's just a much more efficient pathway to get a 5-year approval, to lock in those conditions, to not have to go through objection process every year, where we do see a lot of new objections come forward each time the party comes back. And then eventually we really, the goal is to move all these parties into permanent water right permits, because this is for Sigma, and we don't expect it to be a short-term need. We expect it to be a permanent need.
Yes. What are, just out of curiosity here and for everyone's benefit, some of the challenges to moving to some of those permanent or application from kind of the 5-year? Is it a helpful process? Is it refining a lot, making it easier to then transition to a more permanent right? And do we have anyone sort of in that queue at this point that, we're seeing them starting to take action to have something a little more permanent?
So we do have a party that has a 5-year right now, who also filed a standard permit application at the same time, and they are under our streamlined pathway. And so that can be a very kind of good pathway to go through as a coupling. The 5-year temporary permit offers the unique ability to use the information collected to get through the protest process, which is analogous to the objection process in temporary permits, which is a major stumbling block to getting to the finish line of getting a permit. And so the 5-year temporary permit, I can't say enough positive things about the ability to collect that information. And then instead of having to go through the hearings process, which can take multiple years and be very costly for the applicant, they can do what's called a field investigation using the data collected from the 5-year temporary permit. So it's really a much faster path to getting that permanent water right, which should be the goal of all these Sigma parties.
That's great. It allows for a more iterative process with the 5-year permit there, certainly. So yeah, for folks that are listening and certainly interested, the door's open, lights on. We're here to help work through these challenges with applicants, and knowing that this is a huge strategy and something that will continue to need to be focused on here in the years ahead. So huge, just incredible thanks for, I know, a lot of the work, and especially, 2022, 23 water year just really sprang on us. And you see that with the number of sort of late applications in the season, if you will, that we received. So just really appreciate everyone's just great work and processing through those. And then now seeing, okay, well, what was actually diverted, lets us really further unpack, okay, what are the challenges that people are seeing on the ground, but importantly, just really improving our own processes. So just huge hats off and thanks to that. Vice Chair.
I just want to add my thanks. This is really helpful. And the chart that I like is the one that, has the 669 and what would have been the opportunity. And that's where, I think that helps us to get a better sense of the target. And I think also for those that are, there's the consultants that probably understand this really well, but then there's all the users and the folks that are on the GSA boards that really don't understand this. And so I think this helps to temper expectations, give folks a target. And thank you so much for organizing the staff workshop. I think that's where a lot of the creativity, there's potential for some good discussions, what the applicants can do to improve and what we can do on our end to, because each year this program is getting better and better each year. So hats off to all of you. Thank you so much.
You're here, Board Member McGuire.
Yeah, that's well said. I completely agree with those comments. And I'll just add that I'm reflecting on this, a really great report and really helpful information. And this was an incredibly wet water year. We just heard from Department of Water Resources that there were 4 million acre feet of managed aquifer recharge this last year as well. And so when I compare that against the actual reported diverted here under the temporary permits of 20,000 acre feet, what that shows me is that maybe there's compared to the authorized amount, there's opportunity there for enhancing groundwater recharge through the different mechanisms that you talked about, better education, better tools and awareness of how to implement these projects. And the reason I bring this up is because it's not just these incredibly wet years where GSAs are going to be looking for enhancing recharge. It's all those other fringe years. So it's the above normal, maybe the below normal type years where you have a wetter event and an opportunity to divert and recharge. And so having the GSAs and other diverters in a position where they're able to take advantage of this is going to help, as we were looking at the long-term trends earlier, and there's a lot of room for opportunity and greater recharge in those year types as well. So thank you again for your work. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Board Member. Looking to see any additional comment, not seeing. So just thank you again, and we can transition to conservation.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. My name is Marielle Rodero, and I'm a research data specialist with the Office of Research Planning and Performance. And I will be providing the monthly urban conservation and production update. It will be pretty short and sweet this month because we're just getting it back online, yay. But please feel free to request any additional statistics that you would like to see in further updates. So the data set is being updated again. It was sort of on hiatus for a while I was on maternity leave, and we also had to work to reconcile the new format of the report with the old format, so that took some time. But it is now going to be released on the Open Data Portal. As seen in the screenshot here, it is not currently live, but it will be by the end of the day. We will be updating the links on the Conservation Portal webpage to point to the Open Data Portal site. But there is an existing link on there. That one points to the old data set, so don't use that one. There's still work to do. I need to work on adding the conservation actions and also update the Tableau dashboard, but hopefully with the addition of the API that is a function of the Open Data Portal, everything will be much more streamlined in the future. Next slide, please. The total statewide urban use for the month of March 2024 was about 334,000 acre feet, which is on the lower end of things. And the average statewide residential per capita use was 55 gallons per capita daily. This was the second wet spring that we saw, in high contrast to the extremely dry years before it. So things are looking up, but we will see what happens in the upcoming summer. And with that, I am finished and I am open for questions.
Thank you for that. Any questions?
Just welcome back and glad that you're back on it and doing all the work to reconcile. I know that the change in the reporting system has not been easy to navigate that. And just a little shout out to California here. Just looking at all the marches, this looks like the lowest one reported in the last 11 years. So, hey, that's progress and well done. Setting aside the water year type, and I know it's favorable climate conditions, but nonetheless, heading in the right direction.
Really appreciate. I know it's taken some time to get everything reconciled. There was a shift to the clearinghouse for reporting, but as has been indicated, this is really good information to have, especially as I know we have our conservation regulation discussion. The art of the possible and where we're headed toward. Having just a pulse on the monthly data here on conservation is really important. Can't manage what you don't measure. So glad things are back on track, and we have here an opportunity to continue to reflect on what our water usage is looking like on the urban side, knowing that we have these long-term huge pressures. Even a wet year or two here, as we saw with our issues with groundwater, isn't going to resolve what we have as these long-standing systemic challenges. So just really appreciate, I know, the good work that's gone in to make sure we have this back. Anything further from fellow board colleagues on this or any of the other items here in the hydro update? We don't have any commenters, so absent that, appreciate it. Really appreciate the update. Thank you all. Thanks for your time this morning. That wraps up item number 2, which is our current hydrologic conditions and response, and brings us to item number 3, which is an update on the status of the underground storage tank cleanup fund and opportunity for public comment. Good morning. Good morning. Good to have you with us.
Good morning. How are you?
We well, thank you. Thank you. Good to see you.
Oh, good to see you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Board Chair Esquivel, Vice Chair Diadamo, and board members. My name is Salika Potter, and I'm here to give you an update on the UST Cleanup Fund. And after my update on the fund, I will turn it over to Dana Cordana next to me, and she'll give you an update on the actual UST program from DWQ. Okay? Next slide, please. The UST Cleanup Fund is a financial responsibility mechanism for owners and operators of USTs to meet federal and state requirements. The program is here to help reimburse eligible costs to owners and operators that are eligible for the program to help with cleaning up their contaminated sites resulting in leaking petroleum USTs. The program is funded by a petroleum storage fee of 2 cents that is placed and assessed when petroleum products are stored in those USTs. Currently, the storage fee generates about $300 million annually. And in conjunction with the Division of Water Quality with this program, we also work closely with the Office of Enforcement, who help do a lot of our fraud prevention methods to help us ensure that we're not, we don't have as much fraud, waste, and abuse hitting this program. So to date, since 2015, we've The Office of Enforcement has disqualified about 14 entities where we have found potential fraudulent activities. Next slide, please.
Just actually a
Yeah.
quick out of curiosity, when it comes to those that were caught doing potentially fraudulent activities, are those from tips that are coming in into the program, or are they from kind of random assessments of claims? Just kind of wondering the techniques, sort of how they come through.
All of those methods. We get random tips in from external parties. They could be the claimants of the program, other consultants, or other concerned individuals. And other times they are able to find things from our own program staff who are assessing the reimbursements that are coming in and reviewing a lot of the documents. Other times it could be things that are assessed by Dana and her team where they see something a little funky on their end. So they raise it up to us and we do a little bit more digging. And if we see something, we refer it over to the Office of Enforcement for them to go ahead and take care of it.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that. There's a lot of obviously funding that goes out through the program. And so just that keeping an eye and ensuring, the public's trust and importantly, their resources are being protected is just really appreciated. So thanks.
Absolutely. Next slide, please. So from this slide, you can see the program has received over 21,000 applications. Most of the applications that come into the program are found eligible to receive reimbursement. So we are seeing an increase in applications that are coming into the program based upon the SALT case initiative that I'm sure Dana will be talking about later. And because we have the permanent closure of single wall tanks that's occurring at the end of 2025. Next slide, please. Here's a little information about what has happened during the course of this fiscal year. As you can see, we've received almost 1,600 reimbursement requests for about $154 million. And we have released out through accounting this year a little over 1,900 payments for almost $200 million. So there's a little difference in that because, as you know, we continue to receive reimbursement requests. However, we typically carry, I would call, somewhat of a backlog from year to year because there might be claims that we could not reimburse out right away because of a lack of funding, or it could just be timing as to when those reimbursement requests were processed. So for the fiscal year of 23-24, we did carry over a significant backlog of reimbursements for payment, about 1,100. And now we have reduced that down to a little over 100. And the backlog was resulting from a need of funding. So when the funding came online this year, we were able to clear out that backlog and get them paid out. And we have spent about 50% of the authorization that we received for this fiscal year. We had a total of $380 million to pay out to reimburse claims. As you can see, we have about 190 remaining that we will carry over into next year to fund. And in the governor's budget, currently, we have about another $180 million that will come online next year. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the average reimbursement per claim for this time period. The numbers do fluctuate depending on which years we pull them through, but it's holding pretty consistent of the average rate. This doesn't mean that this is the max amount to close out a case or a claim. This is just showing how much, the average reimbursement is for a claim during that specific time period. Okay. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see that this is how we reimburse our claims by priority class. The priority classes A through C are our higher priority classes, and priority Ds are our lower. but you could see that they are actually receiving much more reimbursement now because the program has done a shift in that our higher priority claims are less of the population now than our lower priority claims. Our lower priority claims are the large corporations. So they did have quite a bit of claims sitting on the priority list. And because we have had adequate funding for the last few years, we were able to activate everything pretty much from our priority list, and we are able to fund them. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to shift and talk about some of the companion programs to the main program. Here we have the commingled plume account program. Those are claims that share a cleanup effort between multiple sites. That program, we are seeing a decline in it, and the reason being is because the main program is able to activate individual claims a lot faster and get them paid. This program was being utilized quite a bit when we could not fund those individual claims right away, and they were coming in with consolidated projects for us to go ahead and activate through this particular fund. And this fund is receiving about $10 million annually. However, we're not utilizing that full 10 million. For fiscal year 23-24, we utilized maybe only about $2 million there. For the expedited claim account program, they are very successful. As you can see, we are seeing a closure rate of cases at about 46%. And since this program came online, we have closed 136 cases with the help of the local regulatory agencies, which is actually awesome. We have finished about maybe $20 million that was still remaining in that account for this fiscal year, but those funds have all since been encumbered. So now we're just going to be spending, and helping clean up the rest of the projects that are within there. We are looking towards potentially running this type of look with the program for the remaining of our claims. The emergency abandoned and recalcitrant account, this account is seeing quite a bit of activity right now due to the SALT case initiative. Regional boards are nominating a lot of projects for this program so that we can step in, get contracts with DGS and to start cleaning up a lot of these projects that have stalled out. So we have spent about $4 million of the $5 million that's available annually for this program. So there's a lot of traction moving in there. For the school district account, we are seeing a decline on demand there. So this program, this particular one used to be very, very robust. We had a lot of school district claims that moved through it. Cases got cleaned up, closed out. We have about 8 remaining active claims for this particular account, about $2 million for it, which is sustaining it perfectly. But we are talking to potentially reach out to additional schools to see if they do have this on their books, where we might be able to step in and help them and offset some of those costs. For school districts, the problem with that they have with this is that a lot of times they don't have documentation still. They did not do that retaining of documents. So we try to help them as much as possible to meet those requirements so we can help get them funded.
I really appreciate that, helping to make a priority and working with school districts here that, are, I know, understaffed and, oftentimes aren't even necessarily aware of the resources or opportunity to remediate this sort of issue. And I imagine, just out of curiosity, I imagine this is mainly sort of like school bus yards and, sort of the vehicle infrastructure that schools have and potential single walled or otherwise, leaky tanks in those properties.
There's also a lot of tanks from way back when people.
we're more likely to use those.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Welcome. Next slide, please. Our orphan site cleanup fund, as you can see, we have projects that we funded during this year and the dollar amount up there. This account is also seeing a lot of traction from the Saltation Initiative. We are receiving an increase in applications. They're coming in a little bit slow, but we know that they are supposed to be hitting this account pretty quickly. So that account, we received $30 million recently into that account, as we have used 6.9 million with another 23 million that will be ramped up and hopefully will be through the system by the end of December of this calendar year to use that $30 million up. In the governor's budget, we are receiving another infusion of $15 million at this time for that program to keep it sustained. For the replacing, removing, and upgrading UST program, we are definitely seeing a rise there too in applications coming in, and that's due to the permanent closure of single wall USTs by the end of 2025. As you can see, we have funded 31 projects this fiscal year for 16.6 million in funding. That program is sustained and is not lacking funding, so we can continue to go ahead and issue grants and loans or a combination thereof to additional projects coming in the door. For the site cleanup sub-account, we're giving you some stats here for that program, but as you know, you just had a board workshop on that item recently to discuss the ranking criteria of that program. So we are continuing to go ahead and fund projects as we can. We are definitely going to be discussing here in a second about funding for that program. But as you know, we are definitely funding limited for all of the projects that would definitely hit that account. Next slide, please. So here it is. This is the big news, right? Our program was extended for another 10 years. So the financial responsibility mechanism also was extended out, which helps a lot of those owner and operators because they were scrambling and didn't really quite know what they were going to do to meet those requirements. So now we have it for another 10 years. And our companion programs were extended out as well. So we are going to keep up the good work and crank out a whole bunch more projects for this. Go ahead. Next slide, please. And then now we're going to talk about the 3 mills. So as you know, with the SB 445, 3 mills of our fee went to the 3 purposes. So the RUST accounts, SCAP, and school districts. The 3 mills generates about $47 million annually, give or take. It depends on how the full stream of revenue comes in. But right now in the governor's budget, how it is split is 85% goes to the site cleanup sub-account program and 15% goes to the RUST program. We are not infusing anything in the school district account because we are not having the demand there at this time. So that is what the governor's budget has. We are proposing to keep it the same currently, especially for this upcoming year, since RUST will need additional funds so we can keep sustaining projects there. But as the climate changes, we will definitely look to maybe changing that allocation should it be needed in the future. So next slide, please. So this is summing up that distribution as I was discussing. 15% is about $7 million that goes into RUST. 85% is about $40 million that goes into SCAP. These allocations will definitely help sustain the projects, especially for us permanently having the permanent removal of the single wall USTs. We're keeping it the same for this upcoming governor's budget cycle and proposing to keep it the same the year after. And we are doing this because we wanted to give an opportunity for the public to go ahead and comment and see if they have any other suggested changes for that split, or if you guys do as well.
When it comes to the 15-85% split, has that been pretty consistent throughout these last years? And just
Yes.
kind of, okay.
That is a pretty consistent split that we are utilizing. So with that, that concludes the cleanup fund portion. I will turn it over to Dana Cordana.
Thank you, Salika. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the board. I'm Dana Cordano. I am the unit chief of the Division of Water Quality's UST Cleanup and GeoTracker unit. The Division of Water Quality, as you know, acts as the program manager for the UST Cleanup program. And we work closely with the UST Cleanup Fund, the regional boards, and local oversight programs to ensure that we successfully clean up and close UST cases across the state. Since the beginning of the program, we have closed nearly 41,000 cases, which is about 95% of all UST cases that we've had in the program. At the end of 2023, we had closed 241 cases. And the UST cleanup program only has had 1,544 cases remaining. The regional board oversees the majority of our cases with 1,246 active cleanup cases across the regions. We have 5 counties that are involved in our local oversight program. This includes Alameda County, Orange County, Sacramento County, San Mateo County, and Santa Clara County, and they oversee about 300 cases. Our current caseload consists of the more challenging cases that require a lot more time and resources to meet closure. Some of the challenges we're facing is no responsible party or recalcitrant responsible parties, funding issues such as not qualifying for the fund or having a deceased RP and having to figure out ways to transfer our claims. And we have a lot of sites with complicated site data, such as commingled plumes and offsite BI sources. Because we are now working on the more challenging cases, our caseload is starting to age, and the average open case is now 22 years. Next slide, please. Since our current caseload looks much different than what we were historically accustomed to regulating, the Division of Water Quality has spent the last 5+ years re-envisioning how to implement the program statewide. We moved from a largely directive program management style to a more collaborative model. We now work very closely with the regional water boards, local oversight programs, and USDA to ensure that our program not only meets the federal program requirements, but also meeting the individual needs of the various regions. Our strongest example of this improvement in program implementation is the stalled case initiative, as Salika was discussing. The stalled case initiative started in 2018 in a partnership with the US EPA to move cases that had little or no active case management towards closure. There are currently 239 cases participating in the stalled case initiative, and we have successfully closed 193 cases since March 2018, with 17 cases in the process of closure currently. The remaining cases are starting to progress and are either moving forward with site assessment activities or have been directed to conduct additional work or in active enforcement. We also have been able to coordinate with the UST Cleanup Fund to provide funding for over half of the stalled cases. Due to the challenges faced by the regions to move the cases forward, these stalled cases require significant time and resources that the regions may not have to effectively address this challenge. This effort has allowed the participating regional boards and local oversight agencies to move stuck or static cases forward through direct collaboration with US EPA, Division of Water Quality, Division of Financial Assistance, and the Office of Enforcement. Additionally, the stalled case initiative provides the regional water boards and local oversight programs with additional resources provided through the US EPA contractor to assist in conducting things like responsible party searches, researching historical resources, filling out UST cleanup funding applications, or even doing field assessment. In 2024, the Division of Water Quality also implemented a state water board liaison program, which provides regional water boards and local oversight programs a single point of contact at the state water board that can help them navigate through any programmatic difficulties. Next slide, please. As you know, the UST cleanup program has been incredibly successful as our program continues to reduce our caseload. We recognize the need to try to impart our success on our sister site cleanup program. There are approximately 5,300 active site cleanup cases across the state at both the regional water boards and local agencies, with an additional 17,000 suspected contaminated sites. These include our highest risk sites, including chlorinated solvents, pesticides, polyfluoroalkyl substances, and heavy metals. These cases lack the most important thing that the UST cleanup program has, which is funding. While the UST fund provides cleanup for petroleum cases, the majority of funding for non-petroleum contamination is a polluter pays model. And this means the discharger responsible party pays for the cleanup and receives oversight from the water boards through the cleanup process. This can bias our work towards communities with high property values, shifting our focus away from the most vulnerable communities. The Site Cleanup Sub-Account Program of the UST Cleanup Fund is one of the few funding options to help all dischargers who can't afford to clean up spills on their property. However, the funding is limited and can only fund a handful of sites across California, as Salika showed in previous slides. So as we move forward as a program, we're working really closely with the site cleanup program to determine how our successes can be transferred to their program, even considering their limited funding. Next slide. And with that, does the board have any questions for us?
First, just continued praise. I really appreciated the continued updates here from the program. This is kind of a quiet workhorse, really amongst the board's work. It doesn't often get a lot of the attention, but it's doing such critical work in so many communities to really clean up these legacy and other issue sites that don't have anywhere else to go. And the amount of funding, the prioritization, the ability to get through so many claims is just a testament to a lot of the great work that our folks are doing, and just have high praise, continued high praise for all of it. So I appreciate this update. It is very helpful. I don't have any questions necessarily that come to mind, but I'm looking to fellow board colleagues if there's anything that they would have insofar as question. We don't actually have any commenters here with us as well. So that may be all then. No, really appreciate the great presentation and work, and so much so that no further question from us. So just thank you.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate the work. All right, that wraps up item number 3, which is our update here, and brings us to item number 4 of our short board meeting, which is just board member reports. So looking to fellow board colleagues, I have just one thing, a couple of things then to mention. One, I was off, I got married. That's one of my big reports. I really appreciate Vice Chair covering the last meeting, and just the great opportunity to have a moment with family, friends, feel very loved and supported, and certainly still have a bit of that after wedding glow. So just thankful there. And then on the work front, last week on Thursday, I was at the California Water Association Spring Conference on a panel with Amy Talbot, David Mitchell, and Ellen Hannock on speaking about conservation. Continued hot topic, I know, here at the board. We had a recent release on Monday, just yesterday, of some update to that reg. So it was a good opportunity to talk about the work, where we are. I put a ton of caveat that we were still in the middle of decision making. So I did my best to not speak, of course, for the board, but give what personal insight was relevant and meaningful. So other than that, nothing to report. Looking to colleagues if they have anything. Board Member Morgan.
And so I'll just mention titled The Home Stretch of Making Conservation a Way of Life. So again, conservation is still a topic. It was a good panel, just really just going over where we began and where we are today. And again, just say, a lot of work has gone into getting us to where we are. And I just express my appreciation to all that had participated in the conversations with staff and our staff of just really working with all the stakeholders over the winter. Many hours went into those discussions, and just again, not expressing any opinions on behalf of the board, but just letting them know that this new draft would be coming out, to stay tuned for it. And, we're continuing to move through this process, and just, my gratitude for everyone of participating in the public process.
Thank you, Board Member. Vice Chair.
I was also on a panel at Aqua on consolidations, and human right to water achieved in part through consolidations. And I just really enjoyed that opportunity because it gave me an opportunity to kind of become more familiar with the technical aspects of consolidation, and also just a refresher on the huge increase that we've had over the last few years. The panel was moderated by Daniel Coates with Rancho Water District, and on the panel was Michael Claiborne, and with Leadership Council, and Larry McKinney with Amador Water Agency, where they've done quite a few consolidations. What really struck me was the attendance and the technical questions that people asked, and they recalled several years back before SB 200 was adopted, and consolidations being a bad word, and just the reticence by many in water agencies to work through these issues, and a completely different tenor at this discussion. So that was great.
Fantastic. Appreciate that, Vice Chair. Yeah, I'm often reminded that we're the only state in the nation that has those sorts of authorities, and I know that they come with some concern sometimes from folks, and glad that that's lessened here through the years for sure. Board Member McGuire.
I'll just round out the May 8th Aqua panel discussions here. So I too was on a panel on May 8th at Aqua, and that was on the Bay Delta Plan, and the title was Impacts to Aqua Region 4 from the Bay Delta Plan. And so the panel was moderated by David Guy with NAQUA, Michael Cook, Turlock Irrigation District, sorry, Tuolumne, was on, Turlock, sorry, was on the panel with me, as well as Alex Rabideau with Solano County Water Agency. And so I thought it was good because it came shortly after the 3-day workshop on the voluntary agreements panel. So there was some reflection on those discussions that we spent quite a bit of time on. It also gave me an opportunity to take a step back and kind of elevate a little bit and explain to an audience that was pretty broad, right? You have water district board members, you have attorneys, you have, just a wide audience at Aqua. So I was my intent was to talk a little bit more broadly about the Bay Delta planning process and provide an overview of where we were and where we are now in the process, just so that everyone's a little bit more in tune with what's happening. And there's obviously a lot of moving parts. It's very complicated. So I hopefully was able to communicate that message a little bit. And that was my goal. That's all I have to report.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Board Member. Board Member Firestone.
I don't have a report today. Thank you.
You too as well. Okay, that wraps up board member reports. We will not have closed session on the Administrative Hearings Office item, but we will have closed session on the Office of Chief Counsel item. So we'll retreat into closed session before formally closing out today. It does not bring us to the end of our meeting. We will just be in recess until tomorrow morning, where we will do our Salton Sea workshop, our yearly Salton Sea workshop. It will begin at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And then otherwise, until then, I think we're in recess. Did I miss anything, Mr. Loffer?
No, just as a matter of logistics, Board Member Firestone, you'll be receiving a Teams invite for the closed session, and for board members, we'll be meeting in 2510. I don't know if you want to start up at 11 or if you would like more time to get some other things done.
I think 11 o'clock works. Looking to my colleagues, 11 o'clock. Okay, well, great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the brief board meeting today and look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow at the workshop. We're in recess until then. Or we'll be after our closed session, but thank you, everyone. See you soon.